Okay, guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about absolutely everything to do with burnout, with nervous system regulation, with stress physiology. By the end of this video, if you guys watch the whole way through, and I promise you it is worth watching the whole way to the end, we're going to be covering off so much value around teaching you how your body works under stress, how your nervous system functions, and how to optimize those things so you can become bulletproof to the crazy place we live life at. So this is going to be a really, really big video for those out there, the high performers, for the high achievers, for the business owners, for the people who shift workers, for the busy mums and dads, for the people who are running full on at life and who know they're burning the candle at both ends. This video is for you. And I'm going to be sharing my screen very soon and showing you guys through buckets of resources. So let's crack in because we have a lot to go over in today's video. Now, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I love this topic. It's something that I have worked on for a very long time. I published a book on this topic previously. We look over here. This is me with a book that I published last year, and it is all about nervous system regulation, nervous system theory. It's phenomenal with stress physiology and the reason that thing is called Becoming Bulletproof is I used to think, or talk about this more so in the reference of just stress less, right? When I'm talking about this topic. And I realize that's not practical. Life is full on. We have jobs, we have families, we have commitments, we have so much to go through and so much to juggle in a day that saying stress less just isn't really practical. So what we're going to go through today is how the body breaks under pressure, as it says here, right? How to fix the body when it's under pressure, and what are the major systems that underpin that. And this, of course, here is a beautiful diagram of our actual nervous system with the actual neural innervation, which is so cool. It shows the actual nerve innervation. And we're going to go through today and talk all about the nervous system function. If we look at this, it's going to be all about the foundation of all healing. So here we talk about hormone optimization, nervous system regulation, and of course, gut health and repair as the bottom of this triangle. So if we look at where we sit in this hierarchy. Today, we're not going to go through all of this because we'd be here for hours, but we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so going through nervous system regulation. And that's a really, really crucial topic. So if we go down further, we see this little diagram here. Now, this here is a function of how cortisol, our body's stress hormone, and our stress physiology functions in a perfect world, which means in the morning, our body, we see here the little sun symbol and then the little night symbol and then the sun symbol again. So obviously we're seeing like morning, nighttime, the following morning, right? To follow along at home. Now, what we see here is blue line is cortisol. So cortisol naturally spikes in the morning, and it gets a bad rap as being a stress hormone only, but it's actually a super necessary survival hormone. It gets us out of bed. It gives us energy. It gets us moving for the day. It gives us liberates blood sugar. It increases heart rate, increases blood pressure. It can give increase things like dopamine and acetylcholine, so you have more focus and drive and motivation. Basically, for us to get up and go and hunt together, cortisol was always there to help get us up in the morning and give us a surge of energy. So what we see here is increases in the morning, goes through till about the middle of the day, and then starts lowering into the evening, as you can see on the second part of this curve here. And then during night, you'll notice that cortisol doesn't exist practically throughout the evening, and it has to be that way for you to sleep well. Because you think about cortisol, you think about adrenaline, those things obviously are not things you'd want when you're asleep, right? And what happens as well, if we looked along here, is we have a dotted line that follows this. Now, evolutionarily, when we were cavemen, right? If we had a stressful situation, chased by a tiger, starving to death, freezing to death, something properly life-threatening, we would activate this nervous system to release additional cortisol, to liberate cortisol. So we'd be ready to punch and run, flight or fight, and deal with the pressure at hand. Now, the tricky part about modern life is our nervous system doesn't know the difference between, unfortunately, a stressful call with your boss that you didn't want to have, an email you didn't want to read late at night, between having one too many coffees too late in the afternoon, between taking a high stim pre-workout late in the afternoon and going to train, between poor sleep, disrupted sleep for the new parents out there who aren't sleeping at all. That's going to jack up your cortisol as well. And your body treats it exactly the same as it would have when we were cavemen. And we found that, where our body is going, well, this is a threat. This is something we need to respond to. So it liberates cortisol, which gets us into flight or fight. And you see this dotted line here above that curve. And it's what happens is this is what I see the chronic stress label, right? What tends to happen over time, unfortunately, is that this cortisol stays high all the time, and we end up living in this place of chronic stress, right? And it feels similar to normal because, as you can see, it does look like the curve that our body is used to operating under. So it looks like it should be that. We get up in the morning, we're red hot throughout the day, and we're charging right through into the afternoon, but it starts showing up in different places. So this here is another example of that, another illustration of the cortisol curve, and I will try and get out of the way for you guys there, but essentially it's the same thing as you can see. It is a rising in the morning, going down in the evening. It has what we call a diurnal slope, as we'll see over here. Now, when we see here, we have ourselves the combination of stresses that life throws at you. So you've got physical stresses, environmental stresses, you've got psychological stresses as well. It can be financial stress, it can be relationship stress, work pressure, anxiety. The environmental stresses we have blue light, EMF, pollutants, toxins, BPAs, microplastics, phthalates, all these things that are bombarding our system on a daily basis. And then physical stresses like undereating, not having enough water, so being dehydrated. Overtraining is a really common one. Training really late at night, taking really heavy pre-workouts, doing big, heavy, intensive sessions. Doing heavy squats is really heavy on the nervous system, for example. So there's also the physical aspect as well. And what's happening is our nervous system is always watching, it says here. And as you'll see here in this, what I've just highlighted there, our nervous system is scanning our environment 4 times a second. It is constantly scanning our environment to see, are we safe? Do we have enough shelter? Do we have enough food? Are we all okay? And if it dictates that we're not, if that that stressful call from your partner, that relationship breakdown you've just had, that that heavy pre-workout you just took 6 p.m., that heavy leg session you just did, and your heart you're still just jacked up, and your nervous system goes, no, I need to be on, I need to deal with this situation. That's when our body will kick into flight or fight. So what does that stress response look like? If we look here, we can see the brain working through the hypothalamus. It goes down and starts our HPA axis. So this is the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, and adrenal axis. But specifically, we probably should say the HPA axis for today, the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. So fancy way of saying our brain tells our body to, and specifically the adrenal glands, which are on top of our kidneys, to liberate cortisol and adrenaline, right? And these things go along and they turn off blood supply to the gut. So they downregulate the gut, increases blood pressure, increases heart rate, dilation of bronchial, so it gets more air into your lungs to get you ready for performance. And then it increases the rate your body turns glycogen into glucose. So it grabs stored sugar and puts it into your bloodstream, so it's ready there for fuel. And that dictates flight or fight. You're in the zone, you're ready to go. You're in literal punch or run mode. You've got fuel mobilized, more air. You've got your body is dialed in, your tunnel vision, you're focused. That's classic fight or flight, right? And this is an example exactly of how that happens. And when we see these people here, parasympathetic, parasympathetic is the opposite state to this. So we have sympathetic, which is flight or fight, and we have parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. Now we also have to look at here, we have chronic versus acute stress. Now there is acute stressors, such as, like we said, taking a really high caffeine pre-workout will jack up cortisol in that transient period. The next 3 to 5 hours, your cortisol will be sky high. That's acute, right? But what we're looking at is the chronic stress. The other acute things would be, like we said, evolutionarily with our ancestors, they would have had acute stresses, being chased by a tiger, having a life-threatening situation. They want to be able to access flight or fight to get them out of that system, to help them punch and run and get to safety. We unfortunately live more in this chronic stress state, and that's where the wheels start falling off with people, unfortunately. And for a lot of people, this one here was a diagram I pulled out of my book. And you can see here that it follows a similar pattern. This here is the morning cortisol curve. So it follows a similar pattern, but the problem is it is really, really high. So we have here a number of lines. A normal cortisol range from low to high is here. And then you see some people who are in the elevated cortisol awakening response in this blue line here, where it spikes really sharp. And then over time, if left unchecked, we end up in this low cortisol awakening response, where basically there's not enough cortisol to get you through the day, and you just wake up feeling like a zombie. We'll talk about that in a second. So over here, we see there's acute responses. There's an adaptation window where you're constantly under stress. That leads to cumulative load, and that leads to chronic overload. So what happens here, and what are the symptoms? Now, this is a really, really, really great place to talk about, because high cortisol is so common that if you knew how to look for it, I think you would find it's actually quite easy to spot in you, your friends, your family. Things that we look for, I actually start backwards. I go to bedtime. So it finds it very, very hard to switch off at night. So you either, one of two things happen. You either lay awake there for hours, you can't switch your mind off, you've got a racing mind, you've got that busy mind, you can't stop thinking about the day you've just had, that email you should have sent, that call you didn't make, that text you need to do. You just keep just going, right? You're physically exhausted, but you're mentally wired. They call it tired, but wired. Now, you may be in the opposite end of the spectrum where you're so burnt out that you just collapse in exhaustion and you fall asleep nearly instantly. But you might find that you wake up throughout the night, somewhere between 1 and 3 a.m., and you can't get back to sleep. You are just wired. You are just dialed in, right? That's because your cortisol has spiked too early in the evening. Alternatively, you might wake up several times throughout the night to go to the bathroom, and you might think it's a hydration problem. You might think, yeah, I'm drinking too much water. Has nothing to do with water. This is cortisol bringing you out of a deep sleep because it thinks you should still be in flight or fight. So you might wake up once, twice, three times throughout the night to go to the bathroom. You might also find that you're tossing, turning, finding it hard to get to sleep. You have a restless sleep. And when you wake up, you still feel exhausted in the morning. And because you haven't had that adequate cortisol, that adequate time without cortisol present, when you do wake up, you just feel so lethargic and brain foggy. You've got aches and pains. So it says here, pains in the neck or back are very common. Tiredness and ongoing fatigue throughout the morning, very common. Reliance on caffeine then becomes the next logical crutch in this situation where people then go, well, I'm exhausted. I've slept like shit. I'm going to reach for a coffee, reach for an energy drink, reach for a pre-workout, reach for a fat burner. Then caffeine becomes the crutch of the stress head, unfortunately. And the caffeine trap, I've got another video on this one here, so I'll make sure I drop that link elsewhere for you guys to watch at home. But this is so, so common for so many people. Now, what's happening with the caffeine problem is that because we're feeling flat, we're not getting our body's natural cortisol, which would naturally give us energy. We're relying on caffeine as a way of doing that. Now, caffeine spikes cortisol. So in a lot of ways, we're just trying to, without even knowing it, we're doing what we would normally want to have. We'd want to normally have a healthy morning cortisol spike, which we're not getting because our body's so exhausted. So we're using caffeine to artificially spike it. But what happens there is you're digging yourself a deeper hole. It's like a credit card, right? Like you wouldn't go and constantly tap your credit card and just buy, but never pay the bill. That's what happened with caffeine. You're tired, your body's exhausted, there's no cortisol to give, and you're just like, stuff it, here's a coffee. I want cortisol now. Even if you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to get it. And so over time, this leads to this cycle where you wake up tired, you're exhausted, so you need the caffeine. The caffeine increases the cortisol, and the cortisol is the reason you didn't sleep well in the first place. And because you're sleeping like shit, you're going to have high cortisol the next day. And they see this with studies where people who have broken sleep for even one night had 30% higher cortisol the next day. Look, 30%, a third more than your baseline amount of stress from one bad night's sleep. Sleep is the absolute king of stress management, and it can impact everything downstream. We also see some other problems around sleep with things like we also have about a 30% increase in insulin resistance, which is your body's ability to actually deal with sugars and carbohydrates. And we also see a lowering of testosterone with poor sleep over time. And we also see stubborn body fat starting to accumulate, and we see inflammation increase. So there's a few other things to talk about, but essentially it's like this vicious Ferris wheel, right? This Groundhog Day style guinea pig on a wheel sort of analogy, right? Where because you're tired and because you're stressed all day, you're sleeping crappy. Because you're sleeping crappy, you're waking up exhausted. Because you wake up exhausted, you're having caffeine, which increases the stress, which makes the sleep crappy. And around and around and around you go. And whilst you're on this Ferris wheel, you're also going to be feeling, as it says down here, depression, irritability, low sex drive, low libido, tendency to gain weight is really common. And particularly if you're someone who has high stress, that body fat will be clinging to your lower stomach. It won't move from your lower stomach. It just holds there. Also holds excess fluid as well. You're going to be craving sugary, fatty, basically crappy foods. You're going to be craving takeaway foods. Comfort foods, as we know, are often foods high in sugars and fats. And that's because our body is in calorie burning mode. It's going, I'm in survival, I'm in flight or fight. I need these resources to be able to punch and run, flight or fight. And so and as we saw before, it dumps glucose into our bloodstream. So of course, it's going to try and get more glucose where it can by making you want sugary foods. So having a sweet tooth is very common a stress thing. Now, suppressed immune system. This means either one of two things happen. One, you never get sick, as in like it's been a year and you can't remember the last time you actually had a cold because your immune system is so suppressed, it's not letting you respond to any viruses or bacteria in your system. Alternatively, you are always getting sick from anything at all. Someone sneezes within a kilometer of you and you get a cold, right? You always run down. You're just feeling a little bit sniffly just all the time. You're just always cooked. That's the other flip side of this one. Now, it says here, less accurate memory. That's being too kind. You have a goldfish memory. You cannot remember a thing. You write a text, you look away, you forget who you're even texting. You're writing an email, you look away, and you go, fuck, who was I emailing again? That is so, so common, right? And that is paired with like that goldfish memory is also paired with brain fog. The brain fog is really common as well. So what are we going to do all these things here? And there's a heap more as well, like difficulty losing body fat, excess fluid retention, poor recovery at the gym, foggy headedness, your metabolism slows down, you start stacking on body fat. Yeah, all of these things here, loss of muscle mass, nutrient deficiencies like magnesium and zinc and B vitamins, inflammation and niggles get worse, spinning your wheels in the gym and not progressing. All of these things. Here's a really great example of the physical symptom pictures of high stress as well. Stacking that body fat on around the midsection, but we're burning muscle as well, so that as we can see here on the extremities, the arms and legs, we're not holding much muscle. So it's just a lot of body fat around the middle there, and we're not building muscle around the extremities. So we're actually leaning this apple shape where we're building the fat centrally distributed, but we're not maintaining muscle mass. And that's really common as well. So what do we do about this? I'm going to stop sharing this slideshow now. What are we going to do about this? Because this sounds pretty doom and gloomy at this point, but I'm hoping everyone looking along at home felt a bit triggered. Hopefully people at home realize this sounds like them and want to make a change. So what do we do if you want to make a change? Some of the best things you can do are looking wholeheartedly at your sleep quality. Sleep quality is massive for this. Like it is the epitome of trying to help repair yourself from damage of stress, right? And I think like when we look at I guess just sharing our screen again briefly, because I think it's worthwhile. When we look at some of the ways we can reverse this burnout and reverse these issues, one of the best things you can do is removing of stimulants. So when I look at this here, this is sources of stress part one. And this is a really common one. So this is caffeine. That's the molecule of caffeine there in the background. What happens here with caffeine, how it's a source of stress? Activates the stress response by triggering the adrenal glands to release cortisol. Then it raises blood pressure. Then it disrupts mood and sleep, which causes energy crashes, which makes you reach for more coffee, and around and around and around you go. Caffeine consumption is a massive source of cortisol for people. Caffeine here, as I've got written, is the king of stresses, right? And it's probably being a little bit cruel, but also if you look here, here's a diagram I pulled from my book directly, which shows the consumption of caffeine at different times throughout the day and then maps cortisol throughout that. So as we can see here, here is 3 different lines, which is placebo on the bottom, then 300 milligrams of caffeine and 600 milligrams of caffeine. And it shows how long cortisol stays elevated throughout the day. Now, why I love this study is because it also shows people the amount of time that cortisol stays elevated, but also mimics when normal people likely reach for caffeine throughout their day. So in the morning, being the first one, and you can see cortisol spikes straight away. And it spikes for quite a few hours. It spikes over the next 3 hours here. And as we can see there, it doesn't come down for like 4 hours later, 3 hours later, 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. It's still practically there. It doesn't start dipping until about 1 p.m. Now, a lot of people at work can relate to this when you hit that 2, 3 p.m. energy slump. You hit the wall, it's the afternoon, you're done. And what do? We reach for another coffee. And that's what this diagram illustrates perfectly. What happens there? Cortisol, boom, skyrockets, even higher than your morning cortisol, which we know from that diagram is not what we want. Skyrockets. And again, doesn't come down till 6 o'clock that night. There's been a 5-hour cortisol window here where your cortisol is elevated above where it was for 5 hours. Now, the average person gets here, starts to crash, and it's 6 p.m. though. Finished work, driving home, time to go to the gym. What do? You take a pre-workout. Boom, and away we go again. Cortisol's elevated for hours. This is 7 p.m. it cuts off at, but you can imagine it wouldn't be coming down till midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And people wonder why they're laying there at night, wired, tired, and unable to switch off, and why their sleep quality is poor, and why they're not getting good REM sleep and deep sleep. Caffeine is almost always there. And pre-workouts in particular, if you imagine having a high stim pre-workout that time at night, it is going to be devastating for your adrenals. So what we can do there is we want to minimize caffeine consumption. We can see in a lot of pre-workouts, it's 300 milligrams is mild. Most of them are 400, 500 milligrams plus additional stimulants. That's the equivalent of 6 Red Bulls, right? 6. You would never, ever think it's normal to have 6 Red Bulls after work in the evening and expect to sleep. So that's a really easy thing we can do is moderating our caffeine consumption will drastically improve our cortisol levels and our ability to not be stressed throughout the day. Now we also have and as we can see here, this is a perfect demonstration here of pre-workouts and what it's the equivalent of. So 1 scoop pre-workout is the equivalent of 5 shots of espresso or 6 Red Bulls. So when you see it like that, I think it's pretty powerful seeing it as a visual diagram, because you wouldn't normally go to a cafe and line up 5 shots like a boat race and sink it, and you wouldn't crack, a 6-pack of Red Bulls and go for it either. So yeah, this one's really good. And look, this is me after quitting caffeine personally. Your HRV is a measurement of your nervous system's health, basically how how much variability there is between heartbeats will dictate how healthy your nervous system is. And as you can see here, mine was very, very low. I was getting really burnt out last year, towards the end of last year. I made the decision to quit caffeine in November. And as you can see here, my HRV continued to increase. But what's even crazier here is my workload was massive. In November, I spent the entire month living out of my car. I drove 7,000 kilometers. I hit something like 40 stores. I was working my face off in November, driving thousands of kilometers, hitting multiple stores. I drove from Newcastle here in Australia to Cairns and back. So tropical far north Queensland, about 5,000 Ks north and back, and hitting every single store on the way, coming back down through regional New South Wales, in through Tamworth and through the Midwest, back down through home to Newcastle. It took a full month of driving, hitting stores, building the brand, doing things. And despite that massive load where I'm training in different gyms, I'm living out of my car, I'm literally having to, meal prep just by pulling in at Woolies or a servo each day. So my nutrition is definitely not dialed. I'm training in random gyms. I'm always in different towns every day. I'm living in motels, so sleep quality is pretty average. My HRV still increased, even just because of that work, like even with that workload, and that was largely because I pulled caffeine out. So I think this is a really powerful demonstration of what quitting caffeine can do to your nervous system health and to your overall well-being. So that's a really, really powerful one. So before and after quitting caffeine was a big eye-opener for me. And this here as well is a bit of an example of someone who's quit caffeine and what that can look like for their daily life. So you can see here before and after quitting caffeine. Before, you can see my stress levels here as based on my Oura Ring data, where it was stress throughout the day, was high and stayed high all day. And this is 8:40 p.m. So essentially I was stressed all day until the second my head hits the pillow. Now, what we see here is when I had no caffeine, and look at the difference in the stress readings. I stayed down here, an entire bracket down, more in relaxed to engaged most of the day. And in the evening, it eventually did have a bit of a spike, but it was lowered well before 8 p.m. And by the time I got to the bed, look at that. Look how low that is. Brilliant. So massive differences removing caffeine from daily stress levels, from anxiety, from HRV issues, from recovery. The stress difference there is massive. So removing caffeine, a huge one as well. Here's another example as well of a day with caffeine and without caffeine. So I'll just get out of the way so you guys can see that one. And as you can see here again, very, very big differences, big spikes in stress levels all day on the left here. And then if we look on the right, we can see very significantly lower stress levels. So quitting caffeine or having minimal caffeine can make a huge impact on your health and fitness. Now, the next part is sleep when you're dead, right? Well, that's a common one. Well, in this case, we're not. We're going to sleep, like good sleep quality. What's the cost of sleeping when you're dead? What's the cost of grinding it out and sleeping 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is? Well, this shows here some shift workers, right? And so they put shift workers through and had a look at their waking cortisol response. And unsurprisingly, their cortisol response in the morning, they had 26% higher cortisol levels than an average person, right? And that's so disrupted sleep quality and working long hours directly leads to nearly a third more stress throughout the day. So really significant data. And this is data I pulled out of my book as well. This one was out of a German study looking at some practitioners. So deep restorative sleep is one of the most powerful things we can do to reset our system, to repair the gut, and to flush out cortisol. So during this time, our body is, really, really recalibrating the HPA axis. It's metabolic stabilization. It's washing out lymphatics. It's doing really powerful things. And so sleeping like it's your job is your biggest priority. And as we can see here, this is a 2011 study, which has an amazing outcome where they had two groups of people who were sleeping 8 hours a night, 8.5 hours a night, or 5.5 hours a night. And this is the abstract of that study, but the results are down the bottom here. Sleep curtailment decreased the proportion of weight loss as fat by 55%. So what does that mean? That means in plain English, people who slept the 8 hours instead of 5 lost 55% more fat. And then the people who slept the 8 hours also increased muscle retention by 60%. So they retained 60% more muscle, and they also lost 55% more body fat. So there's not a supplement on the planet that can do that for you. That's a huge, huge difference. Sleep is so powerful for this one here. And this is like a bit of a shameless plug, but this is some Garmin data that I pulled off a shift worker myself using my product, Everyday Sleep, there in the middle. And on the left here, we can see this is their stress levels throughout the day. And this is evening, into the day, and then back into the evening. And you can see that stress levels were high all day, all night, all day. Shift worker, really throws your cortisol out of whack. We had them here on the right where it follows that perfect curve you wanted to see, that textbook morning curve and afternoon curve, like the perfect textbook cortisol. And in blue, meaning the stress is low throughout the evening. This only took 2 weeks. And this was a police officer on high stress job doing massively long shift work. This was a really big really big win to be able to get their stress levels down by improving the quality of sleep. So here's 2 life hacks we can share that are really simple of improving your sleep quality. Sleeping 8 hours, don't sleep 6. Ideally supplement before bed. I make a sleep supplement, of course, so you'd be looking at ashwagandhas, magnesiums, valerians, GABAergic things like passion flower, lemon balm. If you don't want to buy all those things separately, of course, I make those myself under my product Everyday Sleep with Prime Bolus Nutrition. And I also like to use some extra magnesium. I have a gram of magnesium in my sleep product, but I always love to have some additional magnesium floating around. So things we can look at is moderating our caffeine intake, ideally quitting caffeine intake, and of course, optimizing our sleep quality. And those are going to make massive differences on our quality of life, on our hormones, on our HRV, on our nervous system health, and overall give you guys a much better chance of, like we said at the very start of this video, becoming bulletproof. Now, if any of these sort of like cortisol symptom pictures sounded familiar to you, please don't be a stranger. Reach out to me either on my Instagram at will_primer. Reach out to me on here, drop it down in the comments below if any of this landed for you, and I'd be happy to send you guys some guides to help you guys fight back against that chronic cortisol we see. But otherwise, guys, I hope you got buckets of value out of today's episode. I'll of course be doing more depth on any of those topics as well: stress, on sleep, on hormones, on all the different things. But for today, I want to give you guys a big overview of stress physiology and what are the common impacts of cortisol on the average person, symptom pictures, how to overcome it, and some easy life hacks you can implement as of today to help improve your health. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching. If you've watched this far, I hope you guys got lots of value. And like I said at the start of the video, by the end of this video, you can have a lot of the information and knowledge on how to optimize your health. And hopefully I've delivered on that part in spades.